Everyone in Haywood County rushed to finish their cabins before the first frost came down from the mountains. Roofs were nailed fast, shingles laid tight, and smoke rose from new chimneys as families prepared for winter. But while the others worked to close things up, 17-year-old Elijah Thorne was doing something that made people stop and stare. He was building a second roof over the first one. Elijah's cabin already stood finished on a quiet slope above the settlement. It was solid and well-shaped, with cedar shingles laid clean and tight. Any builder would have said the roof was done. But Elijah climbed back onto it every morning, measuring carefully, driving posts straight down through the shingles, and raising a new frame exactly 14 inches above the first roof. Between the two roofs he left an empty space of air that seemed to serve no purpose at all. People laughed when they saw it. They said the boy had lost his sense. Some said it was orphan foolishness. Others said it was wasted wood that could have fed a fire all winter. Marcus Hurricks laughed the loudest. He was the most respected builder in the county, a man who had built more than 50 cabins across the mountains. He leaned on his axe and shook his head as he watched Elijah work. "One roof keeps the rain out, boy," Marcus called. "Two roofs just mean twice the weight when the snow comes down." Thomas Whitmore agreed. He was the surveyor, a man trusted for his knowledge of land and structure. He said mountain building had simple rules for a reason. Extra weight meant danger. Extra height meant more wind. And winter in the Blue Ridge was never forgiving. Elijah did not argue. He did not even look up. He kept measuring, kept working, his hands steady and sure. He had learned long ago that arguing never changed a man's mind. Elijah had been alone since he was 15. His mother died of fever, and his father followed her a year later when a logging tree crushed him on the slope above the creek. People expected Elijah to sell the land and leave. Instead, he built his own cabin with care and patience, following drawings he had studied since childhood. Those drawings came from his grandfather. The old man had crossed the ocean from Switzerland decades earlier and brought with him small journals filled with sketches and notes. They spoke of mountain homes built to survive deep snow and bitter cold. They spoke of air trapped between walls and roofs, of stillness holding warmth better than solid wood ever could. Elijah remembered his grandfather's words as clearly as if the man stood beside him. "Still air is the best blanket God ever made. You only need to keep the wind from stealing it." By September, the second roof began to rise. Elijah placed each support post carefully, spacing them evenly so the weight would be shared across the whole structure. He planned 47 posts in total. No more, no less. Each one carried its part of the load. Reverend James Caldwell came to see it for himself. He was the closest thing the settlement had to a leader. He stood quietly, hat in hand, watching Elijah work. "Boy's building a hat for his house," the Reverend said later that evening. "Enough extra wood to build another cabin. I told him to save it, but he's set in his ways." The outer roof took weeks to finish. Elijah used rough oak boards instead of shingles. They were heavier, but stronger against wind and ice. The pitch of the second roof was steeper than the first, angled so snow would slide instead of settle. When it was done, the cabin looked strange, like it wore a broad wooden shadow above itself. Winter crept in slowly at first. Cold nights came in November, and the first snow dusted the hills. People noticed something then. Elijah burned less wood than anyone else. While other cabins needed constant fire to stay warm, Elijah's cabin held heat through the night. Frost formed on ceilings across the settlement, thin white ice creeping along the boards. But Elijah's ceiling stayed dry, warm to the touch. The space of air above it did not let the heat rush away. A German settler named Klaus Weber noticed and said the boy was building like mountain people back home. No one paid him much mind. By December, the difference could no longer be ignored. Jer's coffee tasted almost a foolish pressip. Marcus Hurricks had burned through nearly half his winter wood, yet his cabin stayed cold. Elijah had used far less, and his cabin stayed warm and steady. Still, most said it was luck, or a mild season, or youth handling cold better than age. Then February came. The morning of February 3rd arrived with a silence that made old men uneasy. The air was heavy, the sky dull and low. By noon, the wind rose hard from the northwest. Snow came sideways, sharp as sand. The temperature dropped fast, far lower than any winter before. The blizzard did not pass. It stayed. Snow piled up day after day, driven by winds that screamed through the trees. Roofs groaned under the weight. Cabins shuddered in the night. Men climbed onto roofs to shovel until their hands went numb. On the fourth night, Marcus Ricks heard a sound that froze his blood. A sharp crack split the dark. His roof beam broke under the weight. He barely got his family out before the whole roof caved in, crushing everything inside. Other cabins failed too. One by one, roofs collapsed. Families ran into the storm with blankets and nothing else. Some did not make it in time. Through it all, Elijah's cabin stood quiet and strong. Snow slid from the outer roof in heavy sheets, falling harmlessly to the ground. The inner roof felt nothing. Inside, the air stayed warm, 52 degrees, steady as a heartbeat. By the 10th day, desperation drove Marcus Ricks through chest-deep snow to Elijah's door. His pride was gone. His family followed behind him, tied together with ropes so none would be lost in the white darkness. "Elijah," Marcus shouted into the wind, "we need shelter." Elijah opened the door. Warm air rushed out, fogging the frozen night. He stepped aside without a word. "Come in," he said. "There's room." That night, the cabin with the strange second roof became the only safe place left in the settlement, and the boy they once laughed at became the reason many would live to see spring. By the time the sun tried and failed to rise on the 11th day of the storm, Elijah's cabin no longer belonged to him alone. It belonged to everyone who could still walk through the snow. People kept coming in ones and twos, faces raw from cold, eyes hollow with fear. Each time the door opened, wind screamed and snow rushed inside, but the warmth never left. The fire burned steady, and the air above held the heat like it was alive. 27 people crowded into a space meant for one young man. They slept shoulder to shoulder on the floor, wrapped in blankets and coats. Children cried at first, then grew quiet when they felt the warmth. Old men coughed, then slept. Women whispered prayers. Outside, the storm kept killing. Marcus Ricks sat near the wall, staring upward at the ceiling. He pressed his palm against the boards again and again, unable to understand what he felt. The wood was dry, warm, solid. "This roof should be freezing," he said quietly. "Every roof I ever built turned into ice in weather like this." Elijah stirred the fire and answered without pride. "The roof isn't fighting the cold," he said. "The air is." Marcus frowned.
"Every brick thing that is in."
"Air's nothing," he said. "You can't build with nothing." Elijah shook his head. "You can build with what doesn't move," he said. "Cold steals heat by motion. Wind flow, change. Still air doesn't let it pass." Thomas Whitmore listened from the other side of the room. He had lost his home 2 days earlier and nearly lost his youngest child trying to reach shelter. His training told him Elijah's words were wrong, but his eyes told him they were true. Outside, another roof failed before dawn. The sound carried through the storm, a deep, tearing crack followed by a dull collapse. No one needed to ask whose cabin it was. The blizzard did not ease. Snow buried doors and windows. Men tunneled paths just to clear air. Each day, Elijah climbed through the roof hatch and checked the outer structure. Snow lay heavy on top, but it never stayed long. The steep pitch sent it sliding away in great crashing sheets. The inner roof stayed untouched, carrying only its own weight and the steady posts that connected the two. On the 12th night, Reverend Caldwell's wife went into labor. Panic swept the cabin. The nearest doctor was 2 days away in good weather, and this was not good weather. The wind outside could skin a man alive, but there was no choice. The baby was coming. They cleared a corner near the fire. Blankets were laid down. The women took over with calm hands and steady voices. Elijah stood back, feeding the fire and keeping the door sealed tight. Hours passed. The storm howled. Then a cry cut through it all. A new voice. Strong. Alive. The baby lived because the cabin stayed warm. Everyone knew it, even if no one said it out loud. By the 14th day, food grew scarce. People shared what they had brought, stretching it as far as they could. Elijah gave up his stored supplies without question. He had planned for winter, but not for this many mouths. Still, no one went hungry. At night, Marcus Hreek studied the roof supports with a builder's eye. He traced the posts, counted them, measured the spacing with his hands. The weight was spread evenly. Nothing strained. Nothing bowed. "I built wrong," he said one evening, his voice low. "All these years I built roofs to hold weight straight down. I never thought about shedding it away." Elijah nodded. "My grandfather said snow is only dangerous when you let it stay," he said. "Give it a reason to leave, and it will." Thomas Whitmore felt something heavier than cold settle in his chest. His pride had been built stronger than any cabin. Now it cracked under the truth. The storm finally began to weaken on the 18th day. The wind softened, the snow slowed. When the clouds lifted, the settlement looked like a graveyard of wood and white. Roofs lay broken, cabins crushed inward. Smoke rose from only one chimney. Elijah's. When it was safe to move, the people emerged. They stood in silence, staring at what remained. Some wept, some knelt, some just stared. Marcus Ricks walked the ruins of his home and said nothing. Then he turned back to Elijah's cabin and looked at the second roof, catching the pale winter light. "I laughed at you," he said. "I was wrong." Others nodded. No one argued. The blizzard had taken lives, but it had also taught a lesson no one would forget. And it was only the beginning of what Elijah Thorne's strange roof would change forever. When the snow finally melted enough to reveal the ground, Haywood County did not return to normal. Normal had collapsed with the roofs. What remained was a settlement changed by loss, by survival, and by the quiet truth that a 17-year-old orphan had understood something the rest had not. Spring came slowly. Men worked with stiff hands, pulling broken beams from snow-packed ruins. Women salvaged what little could be saved. Graves were marked on the hill where the ground thawed first. 58 people across the mountains were gone. In Haywood County alone, the number was burned into memory. Elijah helped without being asked. He carried timbers, shared tools, and said little. He did not remind anyone of what he had built. He did not say he had been right. He only worked. Marcus Ricks watched him every day. The proud builder had lost his home, his food stores, and his certainty. For the first time in his life, his experience had failed him when it mattered most. What saved his family was not his skill, but Elijah's. In mid-March, Marcus made a decision that surprised the entire settlement. He tore down what remained of his cabin and began again. But this time, he followed Elijah's measurements. 14 inches between roofs, posts set on 4-foot centers, a steeper outer pitch, oak boards on top, cedar below. People gathered to watch. Some whispered. Some nodded. No. One laughed. Marcus worked slower than usual. He measured twice, sometimes 3 times. When he made a mistake, Elijah quietly corrected it. The roles had reversed, and neither man pretended otherwise. By April, 2 new cabins stood with double roofs. By May, there were 5. By summer's end, nearly every rebuilt home followed the same design. Thomas Whitmore documented everything. The surveyor sketched diagrams and recorded measurements. He wrote down temperatures, wood usage, and structural details. His notes would later travel far beyond the county. The second winter after the blizzard arrived early and cold, but this time, fear did not come with it. Snow fell deep again. Winds howled through the passes. But roofs held. Fires burned slower. Children slept through the night without waking from cold. When storms passed, the settlement stood intact. Word spread. Builders from other counties came to see the strange roofs. They asked questions. They measured. Some doubted. Then they listened. Elijah explained it the same way every time. Simple words. Simple truth. Cold moves, he said. If you stop it from moving, you stop it from stealing heat. He never spoke of being mocked. He never spoke of being right. He spoke only of what worked. By the time Elijah turned 20, his name was known across the region. People asked him to consult on cabins, barns, and schools. He refused payment at first. Then Marcus convinced him to accept fair trade. Wood, food, tools. Elijah never became rich. He became respected. Years passed. The double roof became common in mountain areas where winter ruled hard. Firewood use dropped. Roof failures became rare. Fewer names were added to grave hills. Elijah married in his late 20s. He built his family a larger cabin using the same principles, refined but unchanged. His children grew up warm, even in the coldest storms. Sometimes, when the wind was loud, Elijah would take his eldest son up to the roof hatch and show him the space between. "Nothing here," the boy would say. Elijah would smile. "Everything here," he would reply. Decades later, long after Elijah's hands grew stiff and his hair turned white, men with formal education would study buildings like his. They would give names to the ideas he used: insulation, thermal resistance, passive design. They would say these ideas were modern, but the mountains knew better. The Great Blizzard of 1894 remained the line that divided time in Haywood County. Before the storm, after the storm. Before, people trusted tradition without question. After, they understood that wisdom could come from unexpected places. Neighbors once laughed at a second roof. They stopped laughing when it saved their lives. And the quiet boy who listened to an old journal instead of loud voices left behind something stronger than wood. He left behind understanding,